Good evening, everyone. I will call to order the City of Laguna Beach Planning Commission meeting of October 2nd, 2024. May I have roll call, please?
Commissioner Goldman?
Yes.
Commissioner Whiten?
Here.
Commissioner Dubin?
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Kellenberg?
Here.
Chair Sadler?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point in the meeting, we are open for public communications. Members of the public may address the Planning Commission regarding any items not on the agenda, but within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. No action may be taken off agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes each, unless extended for good cause by the Planning Commission. Is there anybody who would like to make public communications to the Planning Commission about items not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I will close public communications and we will move to the consent calendar. The consent calendar consists of one item, and that is the draft Planning Commission minutes from the September 18th, 2024 meeting. Would any members of the Planning Commission like to pull that item? Any members of the public like to pull the item from the consent calendar? Seeing none, would somebody like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Goldman?
Yes.
Commissioner Whiten?
Yes.
Commissioner Dubin?
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Kellenberg?
Yes.
Chair Sadler?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to our public hearings. Our first item is item 5.1, and Commissioner Kellenberg has to recuse himself because of a property ownership issue. Garrett will be providing the staff report for us tonight.
Thank you. Good evening, Planning Commission and members of the public. Item 5.1 is a request for design review and a variance at the property located at 520 Cliff Drive. The project site is located in the R3 zone and is developed with a multifamily 3-story structure over a podium parking level that is accessed via Cliff Drive. At the June 5th, 2024 Planning Commission hearing, the Planning Commission continued the project with direction for the applicant to provide alternative locations for the Commissioner's consideration, as well as additional sound attenuation. The applicant has submitted revised plans shifting 6 of the air conditioning units to the far edge of the lower roof area closer to North Coast Highway. 2 of the 8 units previously proposed have been relocated to the garage and are no longer subject to design review. The 6 proposed rooftop units would be located over common space. Per the Commissioner's direction, the applicant explored the possibility of including additional sound attenuation. However, according to the applicant, the units proposed are not compatible with an internal sound blanket. A revised noise analysis was provided after posting of the staff report and has been attached to the agenda along with a supplemental staff report. The updated report continues to show compliance with the city's noise ordinance. A variance is requested to exceed the maximum allowable building height. Staff has analyzed the applicant's request and believes that all findings of fact necessary for approval can be made as discussed in the staff report. Staff has received 1 letter from a neighbor with concerns in opposition to the proposed project. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 23-2036, approving Design Review 23-2036 and Variance 24-0038, and finding said action exempt from CEQA. That will conclude my staff summary, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Garrett. Before we continue, are there any Commissioner disclosures on this item? Seeing none. Any Commissioner questions of staff?
Just real quickly, Garrett, because the parking is not fully subterranean, we're required to measure from that the floor surface of the partially subterranean floor as far as measuring height of the building. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Garrett, a member of the public sent a letter to us requesting consideration of moving all of the units to the parking garage. Could you explain why that isn't happening, or is it feasible or not?
Absolutely. Following the relocation of the 2 proposed units to the garage, staff did check in with the applicant to see if it'd be possible to move more of the units. They mentioned that the engineer actually doesn't recommend including any of the AC units in the garage because along with the cars, they generate too much heat and require replacement air to cool. So at most, they could justify including 4 units there, which is the cap that they're including now.
Second question has to do with the sound attenuation blankets. Could you, I know it's addressed in that additional letter, but could you address it again?
Absolutely. According to the applicant, the units proposed do not comply or are not possible to use the internal sound blankets, although I believe the sound engineer is here this evening and can probably speak more to that.
At the last meeting, when we reviewed this project, we asked about alternative units. Is this the same unit that we saw before?
I believe this is the same unit.
Do you know if the applicant explored alternative units?
I don't know if they've explored alternative units, but we can certainly request that from them this evening or ask whether they've looked into that.
Okay. Also, in the letter from a member of the public is a CEQA question, which I found, compelling. And that is that these are not the repair of existing units. These are, in fact, new units. And wouldn't they therefore need to be, wouldn't this be a CEQA issue?
Yeah, the 15301 categorical exemption is rather broad. That's the exemption for repair and maintenance of minor alteration of existing structures. In that case, we treat the existing structure to be this multifamily 3-story structure. So these AC units would be ancillary and minor additions to that structure. It actually allows for up to 50 square feet of floor area additions as well under that same exemption.
And if I may clarify, Commissioner, it's 50% additional floor area rather than 50 square feet.
Thank you.
Commissioner Goldman? Just to clarify, Garrett, the new proposed roof AC location is the AC units themselves are located entirely above the common area hallway below.
That is correct.
But the access walkway that would be provided adjacent to that would be over one of the units below.
Yes, I believe that's also correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I will open it up to the applicant. Is the applicant here? You can either make your presentation from the podium or at the table, whatever is most convenient for you two. And if you could start by giving us your name again. There's a little button on there that should, and a green light should come on.
My name is Bob Roper. I'm the applicant and also one of the owners of one of the 12 units at 520 Cliff Drive.
Okay. Give us any information about you want at this point.
Between the last time we were here and now, what we've done is we've taken the units from a 45-degree angle and run them parallel with Coast Highway to be able to maintain the units 100% over common area. The assembly that we're proposing to attenuate sound and vibration has a 1/4 inch of rubber directly over the roof sheathing. Then the platform itself insulated with rock wool insulation, and then the plywood sheathing, and then another layer of 1/4 inch rubber, a stainless steel cap, a unistrut with spring isolators onto the units to try to minimize any potential sound that might go through. The units themselves are Mitsubishi heat pumps. They're 55 decibel, which is the lowest we could find that would satisfy the needs.
Okay. Any commissioner questions for the applicants?
Just to follow up on my question to staff, did you consider alternative units other than this one, which was the one that you brought to us, I gather, at the last meeting?
We weren't able to find something lower than 55 decibels.
And nothing with integral sound attenuation feature?
I've asked that question about 3 times of trades and looking through the specs. If there is one available, we would definitely put it on.
But you looked and you couldn't find one?
Couldn't find one to date.
Okay,
But again, 55 decibels.
okay, thank you.
Anything else you'd like to add?
We reevaluated the sound report based on the 6 versus the 8, and I'll let Mike address that.
So we did a revised analysis of the air conditioner noise levels with the change of the location, and everything's gone down by approximately a dB. 2 units got moved from the roof to the garage, so clearly the noise levels went down. The location of the units moved by a foot or 2 because they've taken some that were offset and moved them. Moving a unit a foot or so doesn't make much difference. So all the units are well beneath the city standards.
Another question, the monitoring of the noise levels, is that something that the building is going to undertake, or is it up to individual owners? If they have an issue with the sound, how is that addressed?
I'm not sure, are we talking about the units that are adjacent to 520, or are we talking about units within the 520 parcel?
Anybody, any
Anybody.
units?
I don't know how to answer that. If somebody has a complaint, I think they submit it to the city, and the city says, okay, we need to do testing, and presumably RJR would pay for testing.
But is there internally within the association or the ownership, is there a process available to resolve it without having to go to the city?
Have you been down this road? Has this come up in other buildings?
Not specifically, not this issue, but it's just an issue of try to keep it out of the public process if you can.
I think we could probably work with the HOA to come up with a solution to monitor if needed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll open it up for other members of the public who wish to speak on this item. If anybody would like to, please come up to the podium. You'll have 3 minutes. Please give us your name, and then after you're done speaking, if you would print your name on the list on the table behind you, then we can get the spelling of your name correct.
Good evening. My name is Pat Lobello Lamb, and I am one of the leaseholders in the unit 520 Cliff Drive. In fact, I'm 302, the unit that most of this has been about, the one in which all of them have been adjacent right to my unit or over it before. They've made some headway. I don't disagree with that, but I think at the last meeting that you had, when you suggested that they find alternatives, that the only alternatives they did find was when Mr. Wank told them that they had to remove 2 that they were proposing to put over the elevator roof down to the basement, because I assume it was because of the height variance that would be required. So now, all at once, 2 of them can be added to the basement, to the units, and the whole area of the garage is the total area of the whole building. And I believe that there are other places, not only in the basement or the garage, and common areas, and also a common area where where you're looking at a variance for one of the units on the first floor. There's room for at least 2 more units on that floor that would not cause noise, vibration, or any other problem to any of the unit holders at all. And I think those are alternatives that should be looked at before there is a determination that there's no alternatives available. And by the way, one other thing, I'm sorry, in my 3 minutes. When the 6 units are up there now, Mr. Wank said in his report to you that they're closer to Myrtle Street, which would be farther away from where my bed is in my bedroom. But they are not. In fact, the first unit is farther forward, facing into the courtyard, the building across the street, and the balconies of the 2 units that are across from me. The 6 units have been placed wider apart, so they're now actually in a longer area that includes the total length of my building, which once again will mean the total length for construction and any work that's done on it will be done on the roof of my bedroom.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak on this item?
Ann Christoph, I just thought I should mention, because I've been to many design review board hearings where applicants request air conditioning units on the roof, and the design review board always says no. So I don't know why the planning commission is now being asked to put units on top of the roof, especially with a variance. That it seems, you know, if you can't get your air conditioning unit at DR, then go to the planning commission. It seems inconsistent to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, back to the applicant team. If you'd like to respond to any of those comments or add any additional information, you have 3 minutes.
Just that we've been working on this project for about 5 years, and we've tried studying every possible location, and this is the best solution that we've come up with after a 5-year period.
Thank you. Okay, I'll close the public hearing and go to commissioner comments. Anybody in particular wish to begin?
Could we ask staff to respond to the issue of not locating, there are 2 in the garage, 2 on the elevator level, right? And then 6 on the 3rd level.
So there were previously 2 at the elevator level. Those are the 2 that shifted to the garage. So now we're just looking at the 6 on the lower roof, and then the 1 close to Coast Highway within the setback. The others would be not subject to design review.
And the reason for not locating 2 at the elevator level was what?
The 2 at the elevator level, so the upper portion of the roof, would have exceeded the height of the elevator structure, which I think kind of defeated the purpose of their placement and concealment, and so they were relocated.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is it,
Sure.
Chair,
Question.
is it possible for to reopen the public? I'd actually like to ask the resident a question following up on her statement.
Oh, sure. I'll reopen the public hearing. If you could come back up to the podium, please.
Once again, Patricia Lobello Lamb. I'm a resident.
Thank you. My question to you is your opposition based on not exploring adequate alternatives, or that you disagree with this in any event? Meaning, if the applicant and the city came back and said there just aren't any other alternatives, this is the best alternative, are you okay with this, or would you still oppose?
I don't really think there's anything I can oppose if I felt satisfied that all the alternatives had really been explored. I don't disagree that they have, in fact, been trying to do this for a while. But I also want to point out that it was always on the roof. And the basement wasn't available for any more than 2 units until Mr. Wank suggested to them they couldn't put 2 on the elevator, above the elevator, because of the increased variance that would be required for the height. And suddenly now there is room for 2 more in the basement. And as I said before, the basement or the garage is the total circumference of total. And so I think that there are, in fact, in that big area, which is open for heat and problems with heat, that could in fact be explored. Plus, I think the one on the first floor, where they're already approving a variance and recommending a variance, has room right beside it for a couple more, so that at least there wouldn't have to be so many on the roof variance that would be required. And of course, it would be to my advantage not to have 6 right next to my bedroom. So I'm looking at it from that point of view, and also from the point of view that it seems to me, as a homeowner and a member of the Homeowners Association, my right to have as much quiet enjoyment as the same as all the other tenants, and I shouldn't have to be having a burden that's much heavier than anybody else if there are alternatives available that could meet the needs of everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll reclose the public hearing and go to commissioner comments.
I have another question, I'm
Okay.
sorry, of
Of
staff. Could you delve into why all units cannot be located in the parking structure? Because it's the footprint of the parking structure is the footprint of the building. So they could be dispersed over that area and not cause heat buildup. I mean, it seems reasonable that that would be the case.
I would have to defer to the sound engineer on that. I was basing most of my information on their analysis, as I'm not as familiar with the sound levels and heat levels of AC.
And Commissioner, just to add to what Garrett just mentioned, obviously there are technical requirements that as planning staff we're not as knowledgeable about. The applicant does have their technical expert here this evening. As we were processing the application, preparing the item for the hearing this evening, it is true that initially there were 2 units proposed on the upper roof adjacent to the elevator due to, among other possible concerns, the additional visibility of those 2 units. The question was asked of the applicant, are there alternative locations that could be explored? And the applicant came back and presented a plan that placed those 2 units within the garage. Once we became aware that that was an option, that immediately prompted staff to ask the applicant, well, that's great. Is there an opportunity to place additional units, perhaps all 6 remaining units on the on the rooftop within the garage? And as Garrett mentioned, the applicant responded that no, that would not be technically feasible. The max that they could place within the garage are the 4 units. And then I'll just generally say that for commercial and perhaps also multifamily projects, but in particular commercial, the Planning Commission has from time to time seen roof-mounted mechanical equipment of various types, whether it's makeup air units, HVAC units, air conditioning. Sometimes that does require a height variance, and the Planning Commission is tasked with making the findings. In this case, that means both variance findings and design review findings.
Does this have anything to do with displacing parking spaces? That the units would displace parking spaces?
I'll ask Garrett to confirm that, but I don't believe any parking is being lost with this project.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. One more quick question, because there are a couple of units that they're not in the garage, they're on just ground, street level, in the side yards or whatever. And I know we probably discussed this, what was it, a year ago or whenever you were here last. So having those, at that level, was there an issue? I guess this is for the expert. Was there an issue with the plumbing or whatever if all these units were actually at the grade level of the building in the side yards and was there is that the reason why they all had to go on the roof or?
I'll reopen the public hearing.
Oh, sorry.
Commissioners, I probably can't speak with the plumbing issues or why they could or couldn't be at the street level on the corner. My role here is as a noise expert, so
okay.
Best questions would be noise related.
Oh, sorry. Okay. All right.
My question, I guess this is, maybe it's jointly to the applicant and the city, probably more to the city. Are we 100% certain that there is no alternative? So as we deliberate, I have no issue with the project, but before deliberating, I'd like to know with certainty that there are no other issues to address. One resident is being burdened far more than the rest of them, and I just, before we deliberate, just want to make sure that there are no other alternatives, and we're certain of that.
Commissioner Golden, if I may attempt to answer that question, I believe it would be very difficult to provide the type of evidence that you might be thinking should support this type of a request. I can't say I've seen that done before, where there is justification, technical justification to support the proposed location in an alternatives analysis that disqualifies other locations that may be more preferable. You know, it's more common to do a report that's peer reviewed for something like historic assessment. I think with mechanical equipment, that's not the approach that's taken. So I suppose what I would recommend to the commission is to deliberate and decide based on the facts, the findings, that includes the testimony this evening, and weigh that evidence.
Okay. What?
I'll reopen the public hearing.
In your findings that you're asked to make, several of the findings indicate that it's not a burden on the tenants or on the people in the building, that what you're finding is the least available for any burden on them. And I think that's not necessarily true in this instance. And I would like to suggest that, I know you've already had this for a while, that in fact this be continued to determine whether the alternatives of placing them in non-parking spaces in the basement or on the first level, which by the way is not at the street level. It's below the street level with a wall and with shrubs that buffer it from the street. So there are several areas. There's already one there they're asking for a variance for. There's room for at least two more right there in the same place.
Okay, thank you.
If one's a variance, why can't three be variants?
Thank you. Any more questions?
Yeah, for the applicant, if that's okay.
Yep. So open public hearing. I keep opening and closing.
Had you looked at those street? I know you've gone through this a million times to try to resolve any issues for the current either owners or leaseholders of the building. You know, I know that you're not interested in disturbing anybody's peace up there, but is there a physical reason why these the other two that are located in the yard setbacks, is there a reason more can't be added there, or is it just? I'm not a air conditioner expert, but I know there's a lot of lines and things that need to be run and whatnot.
Yeah, the maximum run length is 100 feet for the line set.
Okay.
And what we did is on the two that are at grade, those are immediately outside the particular units that those serve.
Okay.
Going back to the ones that are on the roof, we're seeking approval for all 6 or for 12 total in the building. But if there's a person that decides not to exercise their approval to install air conditioning, the number, if it's one of the 6 that are assigned to the roof, would be 5, 4, however many people decide to ultimately do it. We're seeking approval for all 12, and we'll see if everybody wants to do it. Indications preliminary are most everybody wants it in the building.
So is there already some? Because you mentioned 12. Where are the other 4? I guess that aren't counted.
There are none that are existing. There would be 6 on the roof, 2 on grade, 4 in the garage.
Okay. Thank you. I'm good.
Close the public hearing. Okay. Somebody like to begin?
Yeah, I don't mind starting. I sense a great deal of ambivalence about approving this project, in spite of the fact that you've been diligently and righteously working on it for 5 years, and I don't doubt that at all. I think this project is a needed project based on the testimony that we had at the last meeting, for example. People wanted air conditioning, and that's fine. But I do feel that one homeowner is unduly burdened by this project. There are 6 units over her unit, and that seems to be there apparently isn't another solution. So I can't support the project for that reason. I can't make that finding.
No, I'm sorry, the public hearing's closed. Commissioner Dubin.
Well, again, I know you've been working on this for a long time, and we did review it once before and gave suggestions in terms of, whether it's alternative locations or reducing the number on the roof or whatever it is. And, I know that in commercial and multifamily buildings, we have allowed rooftop equipment, so I don't have an issue with that part. I feel like, I don't know if there's, air conditioners are meant for the comfort of the people who it's running into their home, obviously. And I can't say that, you can put a timer on those kind of things or make sure they don't run after midnight or whatever. That seems like that sort of defeats the purpose. So, I feel like you have done everything you can to mitigate the noise and vibration of these units. The reduction of 2 placed in the garage seems to contribute to that mitigation. So I feel like I could approve the project tonight.
Commissioner Goldman.
I share the same ambivalence articulated by Commissioner Whiten. I support the project, but I couldn't vote for it tonight. I wouldn't vote no, but I wouldn't vote yes, because I don't feel that alternatives were fully evaluated to minimize the disruption for the one unit holder. When we heard this last time, there were no units down below, and now there's 2 units down below, and it seems it's still an unfair burden. Again, I'm appreciative of the work that's been done, the time it's taken. I'm supportive of the project, but as Principal Planner Vieira had said, we are asked to vote based on what we know at this moment, and I don't feel that the alternatives were explored in enough depth that the homeowner can say, okay, I'm okay with this, recognizing that there is absolutely no other alternative.
Thank you. Well, I was very close to approving this last time this was before us. And appreciate the extra efforts that have been made to address some of our comments and to now the units, the units themselves were partially over the living space below, which they're not now. The access walkway will be, but that will be used on a very limited basis. And, my general feeling is that, there's an assumption here by some members of the public and some fellow commissioners that there's a burden here, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think that the fact that 6 of these units are located near one unit versus another unit particularly burdens that unit owner. I have personal experience with these new type heat pump air conditioning heating systems, and they are really very quiet. I've due to it getting hotter and hotter over the last few summers, we ended up installing one of these mini split systems just for our master bedroom, and so the unit is right outside my master bedroom. I can't hear it at all inside my master bedroom. I was thinking about it before tonight's meeting, and, you know, turned it on and cranked it up and walked outside and stood right next to it, and I could barely hear it standing right next to it. So with the extra mitigation efforts that are being used, I think, you know, it's one of these situations where people are jumping to the conclusion of a burden and it being this, you know, possible a bad situation where I think when it's all said and done, the unit owner that is closest to these units, if this does get approved, will be pleasantly surprised that that they will not hear it at all, that there will be no vibration problems, and it'll be fine. So, and the issue regarding, you know, has every other possible, you know, scenario or alternative been explored? I just don't know how we would ever be assured of that one or the other. It seems to me we just have to take it on, you know, the efforts of the applicant and just with our general feeling and evaluation of the project, whether or not, you know, after hearing all of the information and evidence that were presented, you know, whether or not we feel as though that other alternatives have been explored and that this is the best solution. So I'd be willing to support the project. I can make, I agree with the design review of this project, and I believe that the findings for the variance can be made, and I agree that it's that it should be considered exempt from CEQA analysis for the reasons stated in the staff report as well. So I'm not sure I'm clear on how this is going to come down, but I will. Will somebody? Okay, was somebody willing to make a motion to move approval?
Before we do a question to Patrick, to council, is an abstain vote a vote? Does a vote have to be yes or no, or can the vote be abstaining from voting?
Correct. So, you know, the short answer to your question is an abstention is always an option for a planning commissioner. I will say that you all are up here for a reason. That is to make a decision, so I wouldn't necessarily advise abstaining, but no, under the rules of order, an abstention is permitted.
Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I will. I move that we adopt resolution approving design review 23-2036 and variance 240038 and finding said action exempt from CEQA.
Is there a second? I'll second. May I have roll call, please?
Commissioner Goldman?
I abstain.
Commissioner Whiten?
No.
Commissioner Dubin?
Yes.
Chair Sadler?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, motion passes.
Motion passes 2-1-1.
2-1 with an abstention and a recusal. That approval is subject to appeal to the City Council, a 14-day right of appeal to the City Council if you don't agree with that decision. Thank you.
If you can't, Chair, give us 1 minute. We'll go.
Yeah, we'll wait for Commissioner Kellenberg to return. Okay, we'll be moving on to our next agenda item, which is item 5.2, case design review 23-1480. And this is located at 1110 Glen Eyrie Street, and Jessica Mendoza, Assistant Planner, will be providing us with our staff report tonight.
Good evening, Chair Sadler and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Jessica Mendoza. I will be presenting item 5.2. This is a request for Planning Commission design review approval for design review 23-1480. The proposed design that will be going before you today would involve remodeling the facade of an existing commercial building, and that includes some site improvements, and the property is located in the local business professional zone. Just to give some brief history, on October 4th, 2023, the project was last heard by the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission advised that the applicant prepare for the next hearing, which was the project was continued at that date, with the following recommendations shown on the slide. The first recommendation was to reduce the firewall to match to the existing building, to also revisit the landscape plan. The third recommendation to retain the crazy quilt brickwork that clads the perimeter walls and portion of the building facade. And the fourth would be to prepare a historic assessment and to determine if the property is a historic resource. The proposed changes include, as shown on the slide, the applicant is proposing to convert the existing period revival style commercial building to result in a more contemporary design, which will feature a smooth stucco exterior, standing seam metal roofing, divided light windows and doors, fluted concrete siding, and dark Shusugibon wood siding. The building materials include neutral colors and textures which are consistent with the contemporary architectural style, which will contribute to the building's high quality appearance proposed in the project. A historic assessment was completed and prepared to be discussed today in the hearing. The report did conclude that the property appears to meet one of the necessary criteria to be considered for the local designation. Should that only be the property owner's consent to voluntarily place themselves on the local historic register. But however, because the owner has not agreed to add the property to the city's register, and since the property is not eligible for listing in the National and California Register of Historical Resources, the property is not a historic resource. The applicant is proposing 3 olive trees with a mature height of 15 feet to replace the existing 5 ficus trees on the property. The applicant did reach out to an arborist to perform a conducted study on what the recommendations would be on the site. And the arborist did recommend that with the existing trees, the roots could damage the existing hardscape and the site walls on the property. And to having the driveway be replaced, it would be great consistent trimming for the existing vegetation. Staff did recommend an alternative as discussed in the staff report. The condition 15 is to revise the tree palette. On the condition was recommendation for some alternatives. These alternatives would be a mix of field-grown olive and eastern redbuds and yellow bells. And on the slide, we have just an example of what that would potentially look like for the growth. Staff recommended recommends that we adopt a resolution approving design review 23-1480 and finding said action to exempt from CEQA.
Thank you, Jessica. Are there any commissioner disclosures on this item?
Yeah, I met with the applicant team.
I did as well.
I did as well.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of staff at this point?
A couple. The arborist was hired by the applicant,
Yes.
and was that by any chance peer reviewed at all by the city arborist?
It was not, Commissioner, and the city's arborist is generally charged with the maintenance and evaluation of city trees exclusively. So
okay.
he doesn't typically get involved in with these types of projects.
I had one other question on page 9, number 9. I read through that, and it feels like it's there's some conflicting statements in there as to whether the Crazy Quilt brickwork is to be fully demolished or preserved. It feels like it kind of goes back and forth in that paragraph 9. Could you clarify that for us?
Per the last hearing on October 4th, 2023, Planning Commission did recommend for the applicant to preserve most of what the Crazy Quilt design was on the facade and the exterior walls. And so staff like to give a recommendation also that if applicant is deciding to remove what the existing perimeter walls are, at least to find an alternative to be able to conserve some of the brickwork that is on the existing facade of the building. But that would be left for the Planning Commission to see if they would want to go for that condition that's addressed in the staff report.
Okay, thank you.
There were a number of comments, letters from the public regarding the historic designation. And the staff report didn't delve in detail why this building would not qualify for the California Register. Could you just give us a few words on that?
Yes, Chair. If I may, I'll go ahead and provide the response, and Jessica can add any additional commentary as needed. In response to the letters that the Planning Commission and staff received today and over the last couple of days, we did speak to the architectural historian that prepared the assessment in your packet. The architectural historian made a few points that we wanted to relay to the Commission and to members of the public. First, they noted that the assessment was prepared based on general best practices and is consistent with a bulletin from OHP, or the State Office of Historic Preservation. And this is specifically a bulletin that I want to mention because it compares the California Register to the National Register. It notes that the California Register was intentionally designed on the model of the National Register, and as a result, the two are quite similar. Now, there are some important differences, which, while limited, are certainly important to be aware of. These differences relate to the integrity requirements and some of the special criteria considerations. These nuances or areas where the National Register and California Register are not equivalent are not applicable to this project, and therefore, even if the assessment included a separate analysis based on the National Register, it would not have changed the analysis for this project. The architectural historian also considered but respectfully disagrees with the perspective that the property style and type arguments that were raised in the letter, the historian noted that there are better examples of this style and type, specifically Tudor Revival. And just for reference, this is in relation to state criteria number 1. Lastly, there was a point made about events dating back to the 1970s, which the letter writer seems to suggest that those events, considering that their legacy, their impact on the community, have attained historic significance. That's a rather novel notion. The city today hasn't explicitly taken the position that those events, namely the formation of Village Laguna, the associated ballot initiative, I believe it's 1971 initiative that capped buildings to a 36-foot height citywide, and then also the architectural trend, which today some refer to as village character in its style, characteristics. That this project is a notable example of that trend. Again, this is a rather novel suggestion. The city has not in the past taken the position that those events are historically significant. Staff does believe that the historic assessment that was prepared by GPA is based on substantial evidence, and it's should be considered by the Planning Commission, but the Commission is weighing all of the evidence this evening, including any testimony from the general public.
Thank you for that. I have another question regarding the landscape scenic highways document. Are olives in the plant list of that document for this neighborhood?
I don't believe they are, Commissioner. And in our discussions with the applicant, we did mention that the staff recommendations were based on small tree recommendations from the Landscape and Scenic Highways resource document. We tried to suggest to the Planning Commission that the applicant or the commission might require some type of a compromise, allowing for some olive trees while also introducing trees that are perhaps similar in some characteristics and that are specifically recommended for this neighborhood within the resource document.
Are the ficus trees on that plant list for this neighborhood?
I don't believe so, but we can confirm that and let you know if I am mistaken.
Okay. And, okay. All right. And field-grown olives are a very specific thing. They're not just a big tree. And they're places where you can see them in the city. So we want to be sure that the applicant understands that. Another question is, there is no elevation, or I couldn't find an elevation of the building that shows the replacement wall, the stucco wall, with the rolling gates. There are two rolling gates, one on Oak and one on Glenary. Did I miss it, or is it in the drawing set?
It's on the site plan.
It's on the site plan, so we don't know what that looks like.
The applicant did provide me with an elevation for today's hearing, and I'm more than happy to show it on and have it displayed. And if there are any questions that are specific for that, we can have the applicant answer them today.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just follow up on that one because I was questioning that as well. I mean, a couple of the design review criteria, one is access, and there's also general plan compliance in which the land use element policy was brought up, which also talked about pedestrian access. In general, when we're talking about pedestrian access under these design review criteria, what does that mean? I mean, does that mean pedestrians adjacent to the property on the public sidewalks, or is it talking about pedestrian access throughout the project and in and out of the project? I mean, because to me, it would seem if we're going to have a vehicular gate at both driveway entrances, where's the pedestrian access at all? The gate would have to be open. If the gate was closed, I don't believe there's any independent pedestrian gate. And so, it specifically says under access, conflicts between vehicles, pedestrians, and other modes of transportation should be minimized by specifically providing for each applicable mode of transportation. Well, this is just a vehicle gate. Where's the access for pedestrians? I mean, I guess the question is, did staff consider this, and do they feel that this addition of these vehicular gates in any way is going against these design review criteria?
Chair, if I may, to your initial point about what's encompassed within the finding, it is worded rather broadly. So what I would advise the commission to do is to consider access and circulation not just within the property, but also flowing between the public right-of-way and the site. So that includes the sidewalk, vehicles accessing the property from the public street. And Jessica can correct me if I'm mistaken, but the project, when it was last heard, I believe included vehicular access gates. And that portion of the project, I don't believe has changed since that initial hearing. And staff believes the finding can be made, but that is subject to the commission's discretion.
Okay, because under access in the staff report, it says vehicular and pedestrian access to the property will remain unchanged. And that's not really true. It is being changed. I guess it's a matter of opinion.
It might be a good question for the applicant as to if the gates will remain open during business hours, how the applicant intends to use those gates. It's a good question.
Okay.
Following up on that, where are there other vehicular gates in this stretch of Glen Eyrie, say, between Thalia and Calliope? Or is this a unique thing? Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I know they have them at the Pottery Shack. But other than that.
Could I circle
If
back?
I could,
Sorry. Sure.
if I could answer that, the applicant did provide a exhibit that I can show highlighting the areas within the vicinity where there are raw iron gates. So I can provide that and show that on the screen and send it to you as well.
Sure. Whatever's easiest.
Circle back real quick on the historic assessment. Was there any consideration, because historic assessment sometimes it can be about the structure, but it can also be about the individual who, in this case, the architect. Was there any significance to that in the historic assessment in terms of the architect who designed the building?
Yes, that was specifically evaluated by the architectural historian, and the conclusion was that based on that analysis, that the property did not meet eligibility for listing on either the state or national register.
So the individual significance didn't make any difference in that, in terms of, this historic significance of the individual. I'm trying to phrase that right.
In this particular case, no.
Okay.
And this is within the context of the individual or the firm's larger body of work, and not being a particularly notable example within that body of work.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kellenberg.
Well, on that last topic, the historic study actually says that it does meet the criteria for representative of the work of a notable builder, designer, architect, or artist, including those of local importance in the Laguna Beach Historic Register study. So your answer confuses me, because that is the only place in the historic study where they did find a rationale for the finding of this being a historical building.
And that's a great point, Commissioner. The report includes an analysis for the project's eligibility for listing on the local register, which are subject to different criteria than the state or national register. So with this project, the historian notes that the property could be placed on the city's local register. It meets those eligibility criteria, as you've pointed out. But there's also a separate analysis based on the requirements, eligibility requirements pursuant to the state and national register.
Right, but to me, there's three. There's federal, state, and local. And in the local analysis, there was a finding that it was historically significant. Now, it's not on the register because the owner did not volunteer to put it on the register. But the fact is, they did make a finding that it was historically significant. And that leads to my question. It's maybe kind of a legal question, and I remember having the same dilemma on the hotel a while back. The fact that a property is not officially on the register, but in this case there's actually a finding that is historically significant, does that keep us from taking that finding into consideration? Or can we still, in our thought process and judgment, take that finding into consideration in our ultimate kind of position?
Yeah, sure. So anything that is in the record before the Planning Commission, I would say is fair game for you guys to consider. As I said before, I didn't quite follow the exact delineation of that question, but as I understand, at least when I was taking a look at the letter from the member of the public, they're basically asking for this kind of...
I'm not talking about any letter.
No, talking about the letter, okay.
I'm not talking about a letter. I'm talking about the fact that there's a finding of historical significance by the historian based on the criteria of our city relative to the Laguna Beach Historic Register. It is not on the register because it only goes on the register if the property owner volunteers to put it on the register. The fact that it's not technically on the register, does that preclude us from taking that finding into consideration?
No, it does not.
Thank you. Now, last question. I wanted just a little bit of a clarification on, I wasn't in the last meeting, the hearing, I was absent, so I'm kind of catching up on this one. I believe you stated in your presentation, Jessica, that the Planning Commission in the last meeting requested that the applicant consider retaining the brick decorative walls both on the exterior wall and on the building itself, and that this current application does neither. Am I correct in that observation?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
My line of questioning was going to be exactly the same as yours, perhaps because we met together on site and talked about this. Just so I understand the way the rules of the historic designation work, it is always at the applicant's option. So if something is deemed to be historic locally for us in the city, it will only be deemed historic if the applicant chooses it to do so. Is that correct?
In order to be placed on the city's local register, it does require the owner's voluntary consent to do so. And just to be clear, there are also CEQA considerations as well, which are not voluntary, and you are making a decision on CEQA with this application as well.
Okay. Okay.
I just had one last question, and this is regarding design integrity and that design review criteria. It stated that this building was originally a period revival style or Tudor style, and now they're proposing to use a more contemporary design in terms of the finishes on the structure itself. But under design integrity, it says consistency with the applicant's chosen style of architecture should be achieved by the use of appropriate materials and details. So if you have a Tudor revival building and you start putting a bunch of contemporary materials on it, is that considered meeting that design integrity?
Chair, I'll go ahead and respond to that question. It is up to the Planning Commission's discretion, of course, as to whether or not that design review criterion is being met by the current application. One thing that the Commission might consider is how the applicants proposed replacement windows. They're proposing divided light windows of a particular style and material, and various cladding materials and roofing materials. Do those changes harmonize with the remaining architectural features? In this case, it's mainly a question of maintaining compatibility with the form of the building, because a lot of the exterior finishes, perhaps all the exterior finishes, are being changed by this project. So there's less of a blend of new and original or old, and more just a complete rethinking of the exterior treatment to this building.
Okay, thank you.
Related also to that is under design articulation, can you explain what this means, Jessica? The mix of materials would compartmentalize the building architecture. What does that mean? And second part of that is contribute to a high quality building appearance. Isn't that a subjective opinion?
Since the applicant is proposing a more contemporary style, what he has presented to us in the plans and on his proposal falls under that category, at least to changing it to be more contemporary rather than what it currently is as part of the design. I don't know.
Yeah, I just don't understand the term. Yeah, I can see that it's a more contemporary, it's the materials have created a more contemporary appearance, but the form of the building, with the exception of the eaves being cut back, and I don't know if there are any other changes since the previous submittal, the form of the building is essentially the same. But I don't understand that sentence, either point.
High quality, certainly subjective to your point, Commissioner. In terms of compartmentalizing the building, I believe what staff was intending to convey was that there are transitions of materials across the building surfaces, and so different modules are being compartmentalized or segmented to provide architectural articulation with the project.
Any further questions of staff? Okay, I'll open the public hearing and go to the applicant team. You'll have 5 minutes.
Got it. Thank you, Jessica, for the report, and good evening, Commission members. My name is Rory Fubister. I'm the architect. I'm sat next to Matt, who's going to be doing the landscape portion of the presentation. Obviously, it's been a year since we've last been here. I'm excited to get back. I think you did a really, really nice job of summarizing what the historian's report is, and obviously, I think they did a thorough analysis. I completely understand one of the comments, and one of the key components of this is it historic? On a state level and on a national level, I believe that Anthony kind of summarized that. Now, obviously, when it gets to the historic registry and that criteria, obviously there are multiple criteria. It ticks on one of them, which is, yes, Chris Abel designed it, and he was part of that project, 100%, there's no dispute on that. But it does not tick on any other single criterion. There is 11 or 12 of them, if I'm not mistaken. It doesn't tick on any of the other ones. And the geotechnical, the historical assessment does go into quite some depth as to the other examples of his work, the other successful examples which do tick all of those boxes. When we talk about the modifications to the plans that are presented in front of you today compared to a year ago, we did try, and obviously one of the big things was landscaping. So all of the trees that were a little substandard in size, we talked about, Susan, I believe, the upsizing to 48-inch. We did actually go and tag specific field groans, and that information was presented to staff as well. So there is specific trees. The tree removal Matt can speak to that to some degree. But the reason for that is obviously very apparent. It's tearing up the roads. It's growing at a fairly good rate. It has upheaval in both the driveway, the sidewalk, and there is going to come a moment where it's interacting with the electric lines above. So that is something which is kind of key to the project, which is long-term rejuvenation. The owners of this building, I was about to say house, want to be there for a significant amount of time, and we're not trying to do Band-Aids. This is a significant renovation to rejuvenate and bring new life in. And I think when we talk about the materiality and it being, I hear the scaremongering of, okay, it's another CDM white box with black siding. It's not that. It's incredibly rich materials. The Shishugibon is a black chard, which both solves the fire protective issues in Laguna Beach, but it also has a rich depth. The concrete siding, which we're using in the same location as the brick masonry, has a fluted detail which is incredibly rich and provides a quality of light and play. And then obviously the steel windows and doors, I think, are actually a vast improvement from the wood, which is kind of currently very much deteriorating on site. There's a couple other notable pieces. The firewall we discussed on site, we have reduced that as far as possible, working with both the building department to ensure that we can still maintain the 1-hour fire rating and also waterproof flashing so that we can still keep that in place. And I believe that kind of ticks on all of those kind of components. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions with regards to, there's a couple other exhibits as well, which we can discuss. Matt, anything else on the landscaping with regards to the trees and the recommendations from
well, you suggested, I think, some varieties of trees. That I did note the ficus is not on the list that you had. The red buds, they're nice. The homeowner likes it. They are okay with adding one of those to the mix. Obviously you want to keep the right amount of space for trees to grow healthy and not pack too many trees in, and it's not a great deal of space to begin with. But yeah, all the things that Rory mentioned about the tree height and the telephone lines, we're at those point with the heights now. With the ficus tree, we probably trim the tree twice a year just to keep it maintained to a certain height. They grow extremely fast. They make a really good mess on the cars and in the driveway as well. So it's a pretty dirty tree in the parking area. But beyond that, I think, yeah, it's pretty clear.
I'll just ask one more thing, if I can. When we met with Stephen on site, I think there was a question about the location of the existing brick wall and kind of the geometry of it and how it interacts. And I did just want to talk to why we are proposing to straighten out that geometry. It's not to increase parking. It is just to facilitate vehicle maneuverability. Since the last hearing a year ago, they've had 3 accidents with them hitting the brick wall, hitting the curb. So I think that's something which we would still like to maintain, is to straighten out that edge. No increase in parking, but it is just maneuverability.
We even had one today. We had a flat tire.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the applicant team at this point? Commissioner Dubin, Mr. Whiten?
Yeah, a couple, and since you brought it up, the articulation of the wall that, in my read of the property, I think the wall it's a beautiful wall. I mean, it's one of the things that makes it beautiful and gives it a lot of character is the fact that it's not a straight wall, that they took the space and they gave up the land to create that very unique, kind of articulation. And I'm going to ask the question again that I did while we were on site today, and that is, not, agreeing that there is a circulation issue with the wall configuration the way it is, and agreeing that it should be addressed. It seems like it's a heavy instrument to fix that by taking the wall and pushing it all the way over to the property line, when in fact 2 feet, 3 feet, some much smaller increment of space to circulate around the building might be sufficient. That would still allow a planter space articulated along the street, and maybe the addition of more landscape and an additional tree in that space. Can you address that possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we look at I've driven my car through there many times and very slowly. The alignment is what we were trying to seek. Right now, the two planes of the walls are basically right and plane, apart from where it boxes out. So the goal was, if we keep that nice in a straight line, just geometrically, and the style of the building is moving a little bit more contemporary, it aligns with both the architectural style of the building, and it also solves a very critical component of the site and vehicle maneuverability. I don't know if I'm allowed to, Ken, but I can also touch on the access to the building. So currently the primary access is actually on the rear of the building. That's where the majority of the parked cars are kind of located for the building. In addition, we'd be happy to kind of add hours of operation. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that use that parking lot out of office hours, which is one of the primary security concerns that the owners have.
Beachgoers mostly.
So you're talking about the front parking lot?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
So there's no access proposed for the rear. It's only for the few parking spaces located on the front side.
So the way, so how will, I guess it's a couple questions. So these vehicular gates, so the reason that they're proposing them is just to limit unauthorized use of the parking lot?
It's the weekend, it's the people showing up for dinner and they park their car in the parking lot.
But during normal operating hours for this
They can be
business, they're always open?
Correct.
Okay, so they're not, nobody's using a clicker and they're closing and opening. So if somebody was on the front sidewalk on Glen Eyrie and wanted to go into the building, typically that gate would be open.
Correct. And I think
And
that's
they
what
could
Star
walk
was
up to the
alluding to, is there's
front door.
no-
Because that presents itself as being the front entrance, even if
sure.
everybody comes in through the back, right?
No, agreed. And there's some accessibility because there's some stairs up. So if you actually walk into the main building, you kind of go up a series of stairs to a landing, and then once you enter into the building, it's another series of stairs. So the people who, I agree.
Okay, and you know, I hate to, you know, continue too far on this, but back to the ficus trees. You're convinced that there's no method to deal with these things, to achieve your goals of redoing the driveway, to maybe redo some of these site walls, and nothing could be done to save these trees?
I think what we talked about last time was when they planted them, if they were planted with root barriers, then it would have prevented this from happening. The fact that they weren't has caused a lot of issues. To add root barriers now to them would probably be detrimental to the tree, especially because of the proximity to the walls. They're like a foot away from the walls. The roots are literally growing up the walls. So in order to get proper compaction in the driveway, we have to eliminate all those roots. The concern is if you eliminate them all on one side, then the tree becomes top heavy. It could potentially fall towards the road. It may or may not happen, but you know, it's a risk. In order to tear out all the driveways, are we able to preserve the walls? It's hard to say because we didn't construct it. We're not sure how that's constructed and if they're tied into each other or not. I think in a perfect world, if you could eliminate it all and start over and get everything compacted good and build a good, proper, project, then that's the ideal situation. So it would be potentially compromising some of the integrity of the building, I think, the construction side of it. That's the concern. So,
okay.
And then it would be challenging to achieve, the best product that you could.
Okay, and there's been a couple of conditions of approval that staff have added in that were not part of your initial application, and you're aware of those, and you're okay with them. One was the addition of an additional tree, with the request that perhaps the tree palette mix be reevaluated. The other condition was that the front site walls with the Crazy Quilt brick on them are maintained or reconstructed using that same brick, basically, and you're okay with that as well?
I think we could try to keep the brick, but it's very old. A lot of it is very dusty. Even just touching it, it flakes apart into pieces. So it's also surrounded by mortar, and to clean it would be very challenging. I think you could potentially keep some of the brick, but you're not going to be able to keep all the brick.
Okay, but that's the condition that's been written into the resolution. So,
I think, if I may, I think the answer would be yes. However, due to the nature of the construction, some of those pieces may need to be supplemented in a fashion in keeping with the existing
Right.
style.
Yeah, understood.
I think that's
Yeah.
fair, but a sandstone brick that's falling to bits, I don't think we could safely say, yeah, we can rebuild it.
Some clarification on the condition, is it only for the outside wall, or is it for the brick that's on the building as
No,
well?
just outside wall.
Yeah.
As worded in the draft resolution, the condition would apply only to the perimeter site walls.
So what, as the architect, what is your opinion of having this kind of slick, more contemporary building and materials with the crazy quilt brick wall out in front? How does that kind of work from a total aesthetic
How do they
proposition?
play together? So, I mean, I joke because I have the crazy quote at my own personal residence in Laguna. I think there's a nice, and when I did my remodel, there was an homage to it. There was a moment where they're not touching, they're not adjacent. There is the pop of color. I think by changing out the driveway, right now it's a quite aggressively colored driveway, switching that out to the pavers and actually blending that. In addition to the plans, there's several new planters being proposed along the edge of the building so we can help soften the mass. So I actually think it does quite nicely play. I mean, obviously the ownership would prefer a more clean stucco wall that they don't have to do nearly as much maintenance. Having said that, I agree that the staff have made a great recommendation, and I think that preserves some of the character and charm that Laguna looks for.
So you're not sure that you can't retain the wall. You're just dubious. I mean, there could be a process of trying to retain the wall and then see what happens, and if it can't be retained, then you reconstruct it.
Well, if I may, I think retain the wall to the extent portions of it crumble and you have to repair it, you will repair it like.
So in
That-
the areas that are sensitive, which I would consider the proximity of the trees and the drip line of the tree. So wherever that falls into play and where those roots are, and we won't know until we discover those, the process of removing that usually is something that you do with like a bobcat. And you would need to dig probably a 4-foot hole at a minimum to get those out of the ground in order to have good earth to be able to amend the soil and plant new plants and trees in those locations.
So there's
they
a
can thrive.
portion that you're saying would probably have to be demolished.
There's portions that have to come out, in my opinion. In other areas of that, potentially not in the most sensitive spaces.
Is there an opportunity to provide an homage to the wall in the building in some manner?
Well, I mean, not having to tear out certain sections that are going to.
No, I'm not talking about the wall anymore. I'm changing subjects.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, I'm now talking about the building.
Steve, just to be clear, if you're keeping the wall with a crazy quilt, but you're straightening it, how does that work?
So exactly, in the areas where that demolition would occur, where they would have to be very carefully, surgically removed in pieces, reconstituted, so that the crazy brick wall would continue to exist, but it would be a brand new wall with new wall footings running in a straight line.
In that
You
location.
recycling the brick.
Correct, and like I said, supplementing in, if there's a sandstone wall that
materials as
doesn't
needed.
work, there would have to be some reconstituted brick that could be kind of patchworked in.
Yeah, and following up again on the brick thing, because, we talked a lot about it at the original meeting. So, and there was 4 main points really that we were asking for, that to reduce the firewall, which you did. Reconsider the landscaping, which you did. I think some of us were hoping that maybe the trees would be saved, but, but you did reevaluate. The brick, really it was important. I think the consensus was that we were really asking for it to remain as much as possible, both for the site walls and on the building itself. And you guys came back in with none of it. You weren't even coming back in with the wall. So now that's been kind of agreed upon, was there discussions and was there thought and an attempt to discuss with the owner, hey, it seems as though the Planning Commission really would like to keep this brick on the building itself?
None at all. We just blew past all the comments. No, of course. We went to the ownership and used the meeting minutes and said, These were the outstanding items. I think that, and I obviously don't want to speak for ownership, the consensus was, well, if we've just had an independent historical report come back and say that this isn't historic, it's not necessarily proven that Van Dyke built it and X and Y and Z. They would prefer a stucco wall. Now, they obviously are the ones that ultimately decide these components, and I think that the board's comments are critical in the process, if I may say that.
Okay, so if now
Yeah.
that you are going to have the Crazy Quilt site wall in the front, any last minute consideration of, oh, hey, maybe now we should incorporate this into the building design?
No, thank you. I mean, these comments were released back to us on Friday, so we didn't have a great amount of time to discuss and deliberate with the ownership. So that's part of the reason. But no, we would like to preserve the design as it stands today so that it may endure another 50 years as a standalone piece.
Okay. And the fourth thing we asked for was the historic assessment, which you did do. So,
I know they show the 4 examples of the materials, the siding, the roofing, the color of the. Do you have all 4 of those samples? Because
my associate has here. Thank you so much. So this is the fluted concrete, which would be replacing where the brick on the building is, which is a kind of unique detail. It's not something that is commonly found. It is kind of pretty in the light, that it does actually play and becomes like a ribbed detailing. The Shishugibon is the black siding. So this is a thermal hemlock that's being charred and does have some rich, deep veining. And then the stucco color was a little bit more of a kind of darker gray, so not a pure white. It does have a little bit of, and then obviously the standing seam roof was a matte finish just to ensure that we're not getting a ton of glare and gleam coming from that west-facing sun. The key for us is to make the building, I don't want to say neutral, I want it to have an elegance to it and let the landscaping and the play of all of those components really bring the life to the building. Okay.
Thank you. Any additional questions?
Yeah, and this may be more to the city. Excuse me. Are there instances in the city where we've replaced the Crazy Quilt? My question is, I don't mean to sound facetious about it, is there a Crazy Quilt expert? Because it seems if you are, it is very clear that if you take the trees out, portions of the wall are going to be destroyed. And so the question is the integrity of what's rebuilt. Is it going to look like a hodgepodge? Is it going to be consistent? So my question is to the city, Anthony, if we're aware of other areas where something like this has occurred, and who does this? I mean, who's the Crazy Quilt expert?
Great question, Commissioner. I don't happen to know if there have been other situations where this type of a brick and stonework design was installed and later removed, demolished, or
reinstalled,
was reconstituted. There was one particular notable craftsman going back several decades at this point that was known for this type of work. The name escapes me. Someone might remind us this evening what that individual is. But staff is not aware of other similar undertakings.
I understand the concept of, well, if we rebuild it and it's not like for like, how do you measure that?
Well, and it's impossible to like for like just by the nature of what it is.
Right. And I think what comes to mind is that we do have a couple very talented craftsmen that we've used, not necessarily in Laguna, actually in Dana Point and in other states where they have been able to make the historic, I don't want to say historic look, to faux the historic. Aged. But character, should we say.
It's interesting, Matt, and I made this comment, as I was on site today, I was actually taking a closer look at all the components of the walls, and there are some segments of the current wall that just are not good. And so, the question is, if we're going through all the effort and the requirements of you keeping and maintaining the wall, understanding that there are portions of it that are going to be destroyed, hopefully the parts that are destroyed are some of the less good ones, and hopefully what's replaced is more good than less good. And my question is, as a practical matter, how is that going to happen? Because what we wouldn't want to do is wind up with something that's more of a kind of a stucco wall than a crazy wall and defeat the whole purpose of keeping the crazy quilt.
We have seen some walls they've attempted to do in the area that look contrived, you know.
Yeah.
Look like they just put a stone in the middle of a brick wall. And definitely takes an artistic approach to do that. I was born and raised in town. I know there's a lot of creative artists in town. We can definitely tap into that, and even if we, you know, talk to some of the people at the Sawdust and who they know, I know they have some of that feature down there. I know there's a ceramic artist in town, Bartels, who's pretty noted and done several stuff down here. He's got he did the whole facade at the Sawdust Festival. He did the closure at Forest, the big blocks that are colorful tile, and all over the place, all over the country too. So I think the intention would be to have a craftsman that can do a good job. You know, I mean, what I'm in the back of my head, I got this mason that I've been using for years, and whenever he has that question, he's like, I don't know. I don't know if I can make it look that bad, but I'll try. You know?
I think it'll be easier to find people to make it look bad.
Jeez.
I could volunteer for that.
But I think we can find, you know, there's plenty of really good masons.
Yeah. I think the question that's being, we're skirting around is, rather than try and keep any of the wall and patch the parts that are demolished and have it look obviously like it's been patched, because you just can't, would it be better to demolish the wall and rebuild a wall that has an equal amount of character?
I mean, the other
that stands for another 65 years?
Yes. I mean, just fundamentally,
But it's not a stucco wall. I mean, it's as close as close to what is there as possible. But we acknowledge it's going to be different.
Yeah. You know? It allows us to really start from square one and build up the way
stop
you
the
would normally
band-aids
do
and
it.
do it right so that it can withstand the next 50 years.
Yeah.
And it's not going to we're not going to be back here in 2 years because, oops, a portion of the building or a portion of the wall got cracked, and new issues come up, a new issue. So fundamentally, I would actually prefer that option.
Or you have
we
old
can do it
and new
right.
next to each other, and it kind of looks different. We've patched some things where the cars have hit, and it definitely looks a little bit different. So, you know, you do have to have a craftsman with the ability to either color the grout a little bit more and have it a little more sandy and stuff like that, so that the grout looks aged and you have
And theoretically, you could do the same thing on the building.
There you go.
Nice try. Different style. Go on then.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant team? George?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay, I will open it to members of the public who wish to speak on this item. Please come to the podium, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Needless to say, it's been very frustrating to hear how seriously you're taking this proposal, because this entire proposal should be rejected. You saw last time that you wanted to preserve those crazy quilt walls, and they're not doing it. But you're accepting that they just decide they don't want to do it, or you're accepting that
nobody's accepting anything.
This is my impression, I'm sorry, and I'm glad you're not accepting it. But this whole project is misguided. And what he's proposing to do harms the integrity of the building. The finding that it meets integrity is false. The character of this building has been determined when it went to design review the first time back in the 70s, and that's the character that he's supposed to be responding to in order to keep integrity. This proposal harms the integrity irreparably. The historic preservation finding, and I think you latched onto this, it is a historic, significant property, even though the owner has decided not to put it on the register. But just based on design review criteria, you should reject this. And the historic criteria is in addition to that. The landscaping does not meet the criteria of the landscape and scenic highways element. Those trees were, again, the same as the building. The trees were approved when the building was approved. And they haven't been maintained properly because they've put lawn underneath those trees, watering the trees for lawn, which they shouldn't be doing. They should be having deep water and not surface water. So that is all creating the problems that they're trying to solve. They've got the problems now, and the tree pays the price. This is not good. They can keep those trees. They can redo the pavement in a way that has some flexibility to it. So if the roots are moving or doing something, you don't have to go in there, tear everything out, compact, and put something new in, and then say, oh, but those roots are coming up again. You use stone on sand or brick on sand, and you adjust it as time goes on. It doesn't have to be a rigid solution. I'm sorry, I haven't finished all my points, and it's 3 minutes, but you know, they've had a lot of questions. Chris Abel's work is more significant than they've given credit to. They don't talk about the School of Art. They peripherally talk about the lumberyard. There was a whole tract of homes off of Crown Valley Parkway called Laguna Woods, that designed by Chris Abel. He was a substantial architect, and the way this is presented in the report makes it sound like he just did a few residences that are well thought of. And to say that this building is not the best of this type, and that's a reason why it should be destroyed, you could say that about any building. This is not the best city hall in the world either, but it's our city hall, and we revere it and we preserve it. And so what we have to deal with is preserving what we're faced with, one at a time. And if we take every time saying, this is not the best of this type that it could ever be, so therefore it's fine to get rid of it and make it into something entirely different with no integrity, that's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to tell this applicant you're on the wrong track, keep the integrity of the existing design, fix what needs to be fixed, keep the trees, and make it continue to be a lovely corner of the town that fits into the neighborhood.
Thank you.
So thank you for reviewing my letter, and thank you for your comments. I kind of resent the comment that it was a novel theory about the significance of the 1970s as far as the history of Laguna Beach. This is one of the things that would be addressed in a historic context statement, which has never been prepared. So we're doing it piece by piece with these applications. But it is a significant period, and this building does represent the orientation of the philosophy of that time, with the other properties that were listed there that were also decided around that same time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other speakers? Please come forward.
Mr. Sadler and Planning Commissioners, my name is Gene Felder. I live at 2680 Park Avenue in a Chris Abel designed house. But what I'd like to do is read a statement from Kathy Yorka. You have her in your packet, a detailed letter from her, but she wanted me to read this statement. Good evening. Please reject the project at 1110 Glen Eyrie. The Historic Resources consultant acknowledges that the building qualifies for the Laguna Beach Historic Register as the work of master architects Abel Wilkes. The proposed project would strip all the character and charm from the building. The hyper-contemporary exterior of metal, concrete, and distressed wood does not speak to the surrounding neighborhood or buildings in any way. The proposed remodel does not meet Laguna's design objectives. At the previous hearing, you made several recommendations, none of which appear to have been followed, including removal of the ficus trees, despite the valuable testimony of community arborists. The consultant's assessment was supposed to consider property's eligibility for the California Registrar. Instead, it states that the property is not eligible for the California Register because it is not eligible for the National Register. Hundreds of buildings have been determined eligible for the California Register that are not eligible for the National Register. The criteria are different, and their standards are different. For example, the National Register has a higher threshold for integrity, and generally resources must be 50 years or older to be listed on the National Register, which is not a requirement for the California Register. Properties are often found eligible for the California Register based on their significance at the local level, as is the case here. By failing to analyze this property's eligibility for the California Register, and by failing to consider it in light of major changes in Laguna's development policies in the 1970s, as laid out in the letters from the public, the consultant has not completed the historic resource evaluation. A CEQA determination must await a complete evaluation, or better yet, you should deny the project tonight because it does not conform to our design review criteria, in which case your decision would be exempt from the CEQA review. And she says, thank you. I would like to add, I don't know how you guys get involved with city council stuff, but there's a master parking plan. The city is looking forward to cooperation from businesses where the public is able to use parking spaces when a business is closed. So I would think the city council master plan, parking master plan, would not want these rolling gates when the business is closed.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Seeing none, back to the applicant team. If you would like to respond to any of those comments or add any additional information for us.
No, of course. So, I mean, fundamentally, I feel like we are trying to respect. I think Chris Abel's body of work is substantial in that he has done phenomenal homes and phenomenal commercial projects as well. I don't necessarily, I do agree with GPA, which was the independent party, which was assigned by the city, in that this isn't necessarily the best example of that. And irregardless of that, we did want to preserve the massing. We did want to preserve the fenestration. We did not add any new square footage. We didn't modify the original grand scheme of the circulation, the landscaping. We've actually tried, and while I appreciate some people don't agree with it, to respect the existing building. We're not, when we first started this project, there was questions of, well, we can add square footage here and add square footage there. And we actually sat them down and said, no, let's try and keep the scope of the project to preserve the integrity of the building. While doing that, upgrade the waterproofing, upgrade the fenestration package, make sure that the roof's not leaking, give this building a new lease of life. And that's fundamentally what we've kind of strived for. Matt, anything else that you'd like to kind of add?
I mean, we've definitely listened to the community in regards to the landscape, and if we could save the trees, I feel like we would do our best to do it. And I think certain trees are meant to be planted in certain areas. I think these trees are, if they would have been planted with the roof area, they would be totally perfect there, and maintained over the years. They inherited the issues, and they want to resolve the issues. So our proposal is to put something in that will last a long time and look beautiful and be less maintenance and drought tolerant and all those good things. So I feel like the intentions are there.
I have a quick question for you. It seems like all the trees that have been suggested, none of them are consistent with the landscape, scenic landscape element, species. Are there any on that list that would be consistent?
I didn't design the garden. I'd have to review the plants a little bit here.
Yeah, well.
I think the only thought when the
And the
original
list.
landscape was to keep it consistent with the block, basically, because there are numerous olive trees kind of peppered. From Dr. Giovanni's has got two over on the block. One south has got one there.
Yeah, there's 3 olive trees just next door to us.
And then the only other final comment in public comment was I did want to reference the historian's report that the California Registry eligibility criteria 1 through 4 mirror those of the National Registry, because I believe there were some comments about them differentiating between the national and the state. My understanding as well with the GPA's assessment was that those two are mirrored.
On the trees again, sorry, the suggestion was made that if we change the method of watering and do deep watering instead of surface watering, that maybe the expansion of the roots might be moderated in the future.
The proximity that it's planted towards the wall, the amount of area that it has lawn. I know we've reduced the amount of watering that we're doing now. You could probably not water that lawn; it'd still be green. You're right on the beach, so it's not like super hot out or anything. There's a very minimal amount of lawn. It's slightly sloped, so if we put the sprinklers on too long, it just runs right off. So ideally, a drip system with the new trees, with a deep watering well, root barriers, all these things that we could put into the new proposed landscape would be more beneficial. But again, we've inherited this traditional irrigation system with spray nozzles. It's just not the most efficient way to do things. Now there's a lot better products out there that will allow us to do a better job of watering to encourage deep growth. Now the olives have very shallow roots, so I'm not even concerned about those doing damage.
There was, I don't know if Jessica might be able to bring it up, some examples of the field growns. I mean, I believe you definitely know what it looked like.
So you didn't quite answer my question. Let me try again. If we adapted deep watering now, would that?
You're still going to have all the existing surface roots, which would probably be the majority, and those weren't just developed while the owner has owned it. This is something that's been since the beginning when they were planted. They have been trimmed properly. You saw them today. They don't look like they've never been trimmed. They're very manicured. We keep them manicured in order for the roots to stop growing, and there's the height restriction of the telephone poles. Those things want to get huge. I mean, you've seen the ones at Main Beach. They're gigantic. The ones that are in front of Monarch Bay are humongous, right? These trees want to get really big, and they're kept dwarfed because of that. Even with all those excessively trimming, it still does the damage that it's done already. So I don't think you could revert that from happening at this point, no.
These are the images of the trees that were tagged specifically for them.
So those are about 15, 18 feet, I want to say.
And that was specific to the comment about upsizing to 48-inch gallons, and we actually made the comment, hey,
we can do better and
we
do
can do
field
better.
grown. So yeah, these are,
Yes, you can.
they're about the same root size as a 48-inch box, but this is these are grown over years and years, and I mean you can see with the tape measure on this one, the crown of the tree is really decent on these. They have a lot of character. We chose one specifically for the areas where they look good all the way around. They're not flat-faced or fan-shaped or anything like that. So, we've taken into consideration picking good specimens that are going to be the corner anchor of that street.
Now, with the this potential conflict between the tree heights and the power lines, is this area scheduled for undergrounding? Are those lines going away?
Not to my knowledge, no. The Woods Cove stops far away. That's over, I don't know, 7 city blocks away.
Okay.
Eventually.
Okay, any additional questions of the applicant team? Okay, I'll close the public hearing and go to commissioner comments, discussion, action.
Do we want to, Ken, maybe break it up? You've done a good job in the past. Break it up into the various components and comment on the components, or you want to have commissioners give just a general comment?
Yeah, I don't know how to break this up, so I think probably just go through general comments, and just, I don't, anybody in particular want to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
I feel like after our last go around with this, which was, as stated a year ago, and the input that we gave at that time, I feel like none of that is here. Like, you basically removed all the brickwork from the structure itself. You're indicating that, you would try to preserve some of the walls or potentially replace them in kind, hiring a craftsman or a skilled mason to do that. And as far as that goes, I know that, if you look at the bricks and the various materials that are used in those walls, some of them are, bricks that were distorted in the firing process. And, so I'm relatively certain that those materials could be located and reincorporated in kind if those walls were removed. I stated this a year ago that I felt the walls and the brickwork itself is like a piece of public art to me. And it took somebody with some skill and some aesthetic ability to create that. And to me, it'd be like removing a piece of public art by completely eliminating that altogether. And I think that I felt like we were pretty clear that completely removing all that was not something that we would like to see happen. And I feel like the materials you're showing, although some are interesting, I think, but it's basically we're going to end up with a black and white building, which is doesn't really maintain any of the original integrity and quaintness of the current structure. Although I know I can see that it's in disrepair. There's a lot of fascias and whatnot that are warped and falling apart. That's just been lack of maintenance over quite a number of years. But I just feel like there wasn't much change from your previous application to what you're showing us tonight, and I'm not sure why there's so much pushback on that. I understand the property owner's rights as well. They have the right to do things to their building, but I think because this is a unique and highly public location in our town, it's not tucked away in some back neighborhood. It's a recognizable building that's been there obviously since the 70s, and I just really feel like there's been a minimal attempt at trying to preserve some of these interesting features on the building by basically removing all of it. I'm not an expert on landscape. I leave that to some of my other fellow commissioners to weigh in on that. But the ficus trees obviously are causing problems with the roots and whatnot, and whether that can be mitigated with special root trimming or whatever. It's something that I'm not expert on, but I really do feel like although it's not exactly my personal aesthetic to to see that type of brickwork that I do understand that it may feel dated to some people, but I also feel like somebody spent a lot of time and energy and personal aesthetics to create it to begin with, and to completely eliminate that altogether, it feels like we're removing a piece of historic public art from our community, and I feel very uncomfortable about that.
Commissioner Whiten.
Yes. We made 4 comments at the last meeting. First, the firewall, which you have addressed, and I think is going to improve whatever happens to that building and improve the pedestrian experience along the street. Second, I would like to address is the historic resource point. It's disappointing to many people that the owner has chosen not to put this building on the local register, but there is no requirement to do that, and the building does not meet the criterion for the California or national register. So, and the city has had a very long, painful, and protracted history of trying to deal with this issue of property rights and historic designations locally. So I respect the decision that was made, and it's the right of the owner to make that decision. The other 2 issues are the landscape and the wall. And I think messing with the wall at all is the end of the wall. And originally, when you came back with your application, your intent was not to maintain that wall. But working with the city, you agreed to do it. The crazy quilt is characteristic right in that particular section of Glen Eyrie. There is Mindy Zoller's office, which has got a crazy quilt on it, and then there is the Laguna Realtors building, which has got crazy quilt on it, just in a stone's throw of this building. And if you go further south in Glen Eyrie, you'll find other examples. So it's a bit of a theme, although it's a minor note, along Glen Eyrie. And that building is a residential building originally, and it has that a character largely because of the materials and the brickwork. The proposal keeps essentially the building form while cutting back the eaves, but all of the materials are contemporary materials. And it is, in my opinion, a very fashionable black and white trend. We have other examples of residential buildings that have, several of them recently through DRB, which have these same materials. And the standing seam roof, I like them on farm buildings, I like them on houses in fire-prone areas, but it lacks detail, the detail that you have with a shingle or a slate roof, for example, which is, you could change this to a slate roof, it would totally change the appearance of the building. Structurally is another issue. It's a black and white building, as Commissioner Dubin said, and once you touch it, it's gone. Now, one scenario is that the building changes, the appearance, the materials of the building change, but that it's a set piece set behind existing landscape and wall, the crazy quilt wall. Ficus trees are tough as nails, and the roots that are, I looked again, are under the driveway and so forth, can be root pruned. You can adjust the irrigation to have deep water in sprinkler system. So I'm not at all nervous about I don't think it's risky to maintain those ficus trees in place. And if if there was a compromise where we could agree that we keep the public perimeter around the building, the public face, the existing landscape with some changes in the ground cover, and the existing wall, then I think there's a compromise position there. I am not in favor of rebuilding the wall in any way. And Marlo is, he's a local hero. I really love his work, and but I don't think this is for an artist. This is for a traditional mason, any part that would be damaged. I'm not in favor of changing the configuration of the wall. I'm in favor of keeping the wall as is, and if there are necessary repairs, do those with a craftsman. And I'm not in favor of removing the ficus trees. I think changing the brickwork in the driveway is fine. So I fall, I'm not, I respect the effort made by the design team to do this building. I agree, with my fellow commissioner's comment that I don't think it's contextual in the neighborhood. I think it's going to be a very loud building, even though it's just black and white. And one of the things that can tone it down is to keep the existing landscape and keep that whole perimeter just as pure as it possibly can be kept. I think it would have been interesting to try to retain the crazy quilt on the base of the building. I think it would have created something truly unique that I've never seen before. And it would be respecting the past and moving to the future to restore, to upgrade the maintenance of the building essentially with the use of new materials. And I don't see why that shouldn't be brought back into discussion, because I think it would make it a talked about building. So my position is you've achieved you've met 2 of the 4 criteria. You have not met 2 of the 4 criteria. And I can't support the project without keeping the wall the way it is with the materials, only necessary repairs, and keeping the existing landscape with some adjustment for the ground plane.
Thank you. Commissioner Kellenberg.
Well, I might be the lone voice who thinks it is a historically significant building, and I do that. I believe that on the basis of the Laguna Beach Historic Register criteria, and I could care less about the California state and national register. What I think the Laguna Beach point of view is what is most important here. And you're right. Technically he found only 1, but it only takes 1, to be significant. I mean, it's not on the record. We all acknowledge that, and so technically, there's not a legal sort of forcing to follow certain parameters. But I think it is relevant that they did find that it did meet 1 criteria, and I think some of the other criteria are debatable. That the fact that they found that it was representative of work of a notable builder, which I think most of us that have lived in town for a long time recognize that to be the case. The fact criteria 6 embodies distinguished architectural characteristics of a style, type, and period. Now, nobody's going to argue that that's a great Tudor design, but I think that's not the point. The point is that it's a Chris Abel interpretation of a Tudor design. And the fact that it doesn't meet a classical architecture 101 definition, I don't think matters. What matters is that one of the best architects that's ever practiced in the city has interpreted it in this way, in a very unique way. I mean, it's got the California style of roof line and deep overhangs, and then the Tudor application. It's a very kind of unique, composition that I think is an integration of that California style that he helped develop in a historic interpretation. So I think you could argue that it matches criteria 6. Criteria 8, it has a unique location, a singular visual characteristic. The fact that they say that, no, it doesn't meet that criteria, I think that's arguable as well. I mean, it's on a corner. It's on a prominent street. I think that the fact that we're hearing the public speak about it is there's a belief that, at least to some members of the community, that it is an iconic location and position. And then it has an iconic landscape garden space. And the fact that they found that not to be significant also confuses me, because we've been sitting here for like an hour and a half talking about the darn wall and the configuration of the wall. I mean, if it wasn't iconic and it wasn't significant, why are we spending all this time talking about it? So I think, and so as I go through the design criteria, each one of them, if this were a freestanding building with no historic architectural relevance, I think I could find that the design criteria are met. I think it would be an interesting building. It's got great roof line, great massing, and interesting materials. I think the color, is I think we could debate that, but through the lens of the fact that it has historical significance, I think it forces me to take the design review criteria through that lens of historical significance, which means that it doesn't meet that criteria. The integrity is compromised through that particular lens, and again, I admit that is arguable. I've been kind of on the fence on the wall. I think if what I just heard from, I think, our most expert landscape architect on the commission, that the ficus could be retained, and that it could take the beating of the root pruning, so you could regrade. That if that is the case, then I think that's where I would try and go. And if that's the case, there's the opportunity of trying to save the wall. So I would be supportive of that. If that wasn't possible, the rebuilding of a wall, I think I could probably go there if I needed to. I think the trees you've picked are beautiful. I think they're of scale. I think that but again, maintaining the existing trees, I think would be preference. But I wouldn't be. I don't believe if we were reconfiguring the wall, I think I would need to have the wall not be completely straight. We've talked about that. I don't think it needs to be. I think you can have optimal circulation with a reconfiguration of that particular courtyard wall piece and still maintain some unique, integrity there. But in terms of the architecture, I'm going to have to agree with Susan that I think that I do think we should try and maintain the brick on the building. I think that's integral to the historic sort of significance of the building, and that I completely support the idea of renovating the building and finding a way of having our cake and eat it too, of maintaining the brick on the building, and find a way of refreshing it and making it interesting, and setting it up for another 50 years of use. And I know that you don't agree with that, but that's my position.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldman.
Yeah, I mean, my position is similar to the three that were articulated. I think you were asked from a year ago's meeting to come back with 4 things. You addressed the wall, the firewall. I believe that the historic study was prepared and used as a vehicle to ignore the other 2 things that we asked for. It was deemed not to be historic, so therefore the other things could be eliminated. One comment I'll make, I've already said that I share the view of the 3, so I don't need to add on that. I'm generally very pro property owner, and I'm generally very pro that an owner of a property has rights to do what they want with the property. I think, however, in this case, this building was bought with a responsibility. And I think the responsibility to the building and to the area is more important than the owner's right to do whatever he wants with the building. The owner bought this building in the state that it's in, recognizing what it was. And, you know, where I generally err towards let building owners do what they want with their buildings, I think in this case, the design integrity is important and needs to be maintained. So I share the view that's been espoused so far.
Yeah, well, very thoughtful comments from all the commissioners. You know, when I first received the staff report and was going over the stuff for this week's meeting and saw this, you know, my first initial impression was, you know, disappointment. You know, I just felt as though, you know, at first glance, I'm like, what if anything we asked for was done here? And then, you know, then kind of realized that, oh yeah, okay, some things, yes, all right, with, you know, the firewall was reduced. But, you know, I think the main focus and thrust of our comments at the previous meeting were about the, you know, the current state and design of this building and trying to maintain some of that, you know, character that this building has. I, like Commissioner Goldman, you know, have this struggle about, you know, where, you know, should we draw the line, or what's you know, our responsibility and, you know, versus, you know, a property owner's rights to do, you know, to do what develop their property as they see fit. And, you know, there was, you know, some comments that were made, like saying that, you know, you guys, you planning commission, you should, you know, make this homeowner or this building owner do this or do the right thing. You know, well, you know, that it becomes a little subjective and all that. But and so, you know, my feeling was at first, I was like, I'm having a hard time supporting this. You know, this is. You know, so then I'm going through the design review criteria and other portions of what, you know, what can I actually hang my hat on and say have some sort of logical basis for not supporting this. And so really it came down to, you know, a few of these design review criteria. You know, and some of them have been explained away or explained to my satisfaction. The access thing, you know, I think is, you know, maybe okay. I guess nobody really weighed in whether or not they're for or against vehicular gates. You know, but the design integrity portion of it really is the one that I'm having a struggle with. I mean, does what's being proposed and the changes proposed really go with the architecture of the building itself? And I, you know, like Commissioner Dubin said, feel as though this brickwork was so, you know, unique. It is almost like a work of art, and really, you know, we were pressing hard, you know, for that to be maintained. You know, nobody's really mentioned, but another, you know, major element of this existing building was the chimney, and you know, the chimney's being proposed to be completely removed and demolished, and that had all the brickwork on it as well, correct? I mean, so right there, you're losing a major design element of this existing building that gave it a lot of character. So, regarding the other issues, the trees, the ficus, I'm kind of going back and forth on it in my own mind. I understand that they're causing existing problems, that there's there's a good possibility that they'll continue to cause problems in the future. There's the issue with them growing quickly and getting up into the overhead lines, which will be a challenge. So I could really go either way on that. I think that the plants, the trees, that you are proposing and the ones that you showed on the screen, look to be adequate in terms of substitutions. I do agree with the conditions of approval requiring that fifth tree. Yes, the rock wall, I think, should be maintained as much as possible. I'm not as concerned that if certain portions of it needed to be reconstructed, I believe that could be done in such a way that it would blend and not be obvious that way. And I also agree, regarding the whole historic assessment thing, I agree with the final assessment that, that there's a criteria there that makes it eligible for the local register. But that does not, and I don't believe that it is eligible for the California or the National Register. However, that doesn't mean that we as planning commissioners can't make our own judgment on whether or not we think something is historic and whether or not it requires a certain other level of respect for that. And I've kind of come, to that independent conclusion that even though the owner has decided not to put it on the local register, we have, the ability to make our own judgment call on this and decide that I believe it should get some additional respect for being historic. So I'm not sure, where that leaves us now. I mean, we've got a situation here where you've got a building owner who wants what he wants, and it sounds as though heard our comments clearly from the previous meeting, considered them, and then decided no, that's not what he wanted to do. So, how we move forward at this point is, I'm open to suggestions.
To ask Anthony and Patrick, often in a situation like this where it appears that the Planning Commission is fundamentally not supportive of the project as submitted, isn't the applicant given the choice of a vote or a continuance?
Correct. So I think that would be entirely appropriate to ask the applicant whether or not they would want to come back before the Planning Commission, or as Mr. Chair explained, they are entitled to a decision one way or the other. Should they want that tonight, that would also be there.
Right. So I think that's kind of where we're at, is that, it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to start discussions about a lot of different options, or who's for this or who's for that. If, the applicant, so your options right now are, you can ask for a vote on this, and just an up or down vote, and see how that goes. There's always a right of appeal to the city council if you don't like the decision that we make. Or you could ask for a continuance if you felt as though there's any possibility of moving in the direction that we're asking you to move. If there's not, it's us asking for a majority of the brick to be remain on the building itself. So if that's a non-starter with your client, maybe that doesn't make a lot of sense. But you can ask for a continuance, and that could give you the opportunity to discuss it further with your client and decide. And then come back at the next meeting and say, I'm sorry, we've had extensive discussions, we've decided to not make any changes, or we've made these minor revisions. We know this is what you were asking for, but we'll take another shot at it, and we'll ask for a vote this time, and then deal with it that way. So it's really up to you how you would like to proceed.
Absolutely. I am just confirming it. Okay. They would like to proceed with a vote.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion?
And Chair, just for the Commission's edification, I believe after speaking with Anthony, since the resolution as it was, I believe, one for approval, I think the best direction would be to direct staff to come back with a resolution of denial. That way we can ensure that all of the reasons that I assume will be articulated in the motion accurately reflect the Planning Commission's decision.
Okay. So we basically would ask this, we're not continuing it, but we're asking staff to come back with a revised resolution at a future meeting that we would then vote on? No,
Correct.
no.
No,
Well,
so-
why would,
Or are we asking, or are we making a motion to reject?
Correct, yeah, so the decision would be tonight.
Yeah.
Once again, in hearing all of the various, we want to make sure that whatever that decision is accurately reflects the will of the Planning Commission. So when it comes back, there would not be a new hearing, we wouldn't reopen anything. All you guys would do would be ensure that what we put down on that resolution is accurate. That would be.
I've never heard of this. Why aren't we taking a vote?
No, so once again, the vote would be, and once again, maybe I can reassess with Anthony. During your guys' deliberations, we probably heard half a dozen, if not more reasons. And so once again, the resolution as drafted in the staff report was one of approval. When it's such a change, when it's such a, yes, diametrically opposed, we want to make sure that we get it right. We want to make sure that all of the reasons articulated are properly put down in the resolution. Once again, that's a suggestion. It doesn't have to be taken. If instead the Planning Commission is comfortable just giving direction to staff and says, you guys go ahead with it, I am also good with that.
Is what you're suggesting, Patrick, that we make the motion to oh, I'm sorry. Is what you're suggesting, Patrick, that we make the motion to deny it?
Correct. The decision would be voted on, and once again, this is just one suggestion. If you guys simply want to make a motion and trust that myself and staff will articulate that in the resolution and have it not come back, that is your guys' prerogative.
I think if we articulate it in the motion as best as we can, then I for one trust you to.
Understood.
To take, so it doesn't have to come back and move on, and they're gonna obviously try and appeal it to the city council, which is fine, and they can do that quicker if we just move forward.
Right.
Understood.
Does anybody feel confident that they can make this motion with and articulate our reasoning?
I'll give it a try.
Okay.
I move that, I guess I need to have all the numbers, right? Okay. I move that we deny the resolution approving Design Review 23-1480 on the basis that, number one, the applicant did not respond adequately to direction given in the last Planning Commission meeting by only fulfilling 2 of the 4 requests. That 2, that the commission believes that an attempt should be made to retain the ficus trees. That is not reflected in the current plans. 3, that the wall that is in the plan being demolished and reconfigured should be an serious attempt should be made to retain that to the extent possible. 4, that the what do we call the brick?
Crazy quilt.
The crazy quilt brick should be retained on the building. It is a fundamental component of the integrity of the building. That 5, the commission believes that the building arguably has historical value within the community, as identified by the applicant's consultant in doing an evaluation of the Laguna Beach historical register criteria. 6. That's my 5. Okay, we'll stop at 5.
Excellent job.
Okay. All right, is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Goldman?
Yes.
Commissioner Whiten?
Yes.
Commissioner Dubin?
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Kellenberg?
Yes.
Chair Sadler?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the motion is denied unanimously, and there's a 14-day right of appeal to the City Council should you not agree with that decision. Thank you. We're going to take a short break to allow us to kind of switch over before our next item, item 5.3. We'll be back at 8:30. Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order, and I need my thing back. It's just fun. Yeah, we're moving on to item 5.3. This is conditional use permit 24-1869 and design review 24-1871 at 1121 Glen Airy Street.
Chair, if I may, I wanted to introduce a new face to the Planning Commission. Shahryar Khan is one of our contract planners. He just hit his 1-year anniversary with the city. We're really happy to have him and to bring him to the Planning Commission this evening. He's presented to Council, DRB, and now he's completing the circuit by being before you this evening. Welcome, Shahryar. I'll turn it over to you for the presentation.
Welcome, Shahryar.
Chair, before we go on, would you wait for disclosures, or you want it now? After staff, or?
Go ahead and we can do disclosures.
Okay. I just want to make a note for the public record that I am friends with the applicant and have a 50-minute radio show on KXFM once a week. There is no financial compensation of any kind, nor is there any financial benefit to me personally doing the show. I feel I can render a impartial review of the application based solely on the information in the staff report and review at this public meeting.
Thank you for that. Any other disclosures? None. Okay. Back to you, Shahryar.
Thank you. Good evening, Planning Commission and members of the public. Item 5.3 is a request for a conditional use permit and design review to relocate and operate a radio station with a 10-foot 8-inch roof-mounted antenna in the local business professional zone. The applicant is also proposing a low-power FM antenna My apologies. The subject property is located at 1121 Glen Airy Street, which is improved with a 1,280 square foot, 2-story mixed-use building. The lower level consists of an ADU and a commercial space, and the upper level is occupied by a short-term lodging unit. KXFM, operated by Laguna Radio Incorporated, is a low-power FM radio station licensed by the FCC to broadcast to Laguna Beach and surrounding areas. As shown here in the area highlighted in red, the radio station is proposed within a portion of the lower level commercial space currently occupied by La Vida Laguna. The applicant is proposing a recording room with a radio console, an office space with studio equipment, and a reception space within a common lobby area to be shared with La Vida Laguna. Some minor tenant improvements are also proposed, which include replacement of existing windows and installation for sound attenuation purposes. The applicant is also proposing a low-power FM antenna, shown here on the left, which measures 58 inches long, 32 inches wide, and 32 inches tall. The antenna is proposed to be mounted on and supported by a 1.5-inch diameter pole that would extend 10 feet, 8 inches above the roof surface. The roof plan displayed on the right shows the antenna will be situated 11 feet 2 inches from the north-facing elevation of the building and 10 feet 10 inches from the east-facing elevation. The proposed 25-foot height of the antenna, as measured from the lowest finished floor, complies with the maximum allowable height for the structure in the LDP zone and the height allowed for wireless facilities. The project is in compliance of conditional use permit findings. The proposed use is not considered an intensification of use, and with the applicant's proposed incorporation of sound attenuation within the building, noise transmission beyond the exterior building walls is expected to be minimal. The proposed use is also a resident serving business. The project is in compliance with the design review criteria and findings as well. The proposed 25-foot height of the antenna remains below the maximum allowable height. The antenna and its support structure has a minimal silhouette, which will maintain the integrity of the existing architecture and ensure that these improvements visually recede to the extent feasible. Staff has not received any public correspondence regarding the project, and staff recommends that the Planning Commission, by motion, adopt a resolution approving conditional use permit 24-1869 and design review 24-1871, and finding said action exempt from CEQA. This concludes staff report, and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any questions of staff at this point?
I've got a couple. So with this application, there is no additional parking requirement, right?
Yes, there's no additional parking requirement. Staff has determined there is no intensification of
Okay.
use.
And there's no new sign permit at this time?
There is a sign permit included with the application. However, it's not subject to planning commission or design review. It can be, staff has determined that it can be approved and processed administratively.
All right, good. As far as the hours of operation, it's my understanding that the station, besides having live, hosts in the during the daytime and some evenings, that it does broadcast 24/7 with music and other programming that's recorded. And in the resolution number 22, it states that the hours of operation are from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. Feels like a little conflict there. Is there any clarity on that might?
I believe the hours of operation are limited to personnel and being there. However, correct me if I'm wrong. I can defer to the planning manager regarding that. That's correct. Okay.
Okay. My only other question for staff is concerns about RF exposure as it pertains to the secret Class 1 exemption, and additionally, when we have discussed in the past, and it's been quite a while since we've had something that like a small cell or a radio or an antenna of some sort that emits RF or EMF emissions as it pertains to public health, that we're not really allowed to address any of that. I guess the question is why is that even in the staff report?
Thank you, Commissioner. It's part of the staff report due to some of the requirements of our wireless chapter of the ordinance, which requests indication of certain information. But you are correct. It's the FCC that regulates the standards and regulations when it comes to RF emissions.
Because there is a requirement in the staff report that there is some kind of a warning sign for anybody who may go up on the roof and affect a repair or whatever to the antenna. So obviously, staff has made that a condition of approval. So there is, at least for anybody who is dealing with that, like I say, if during a repair or something like that they are being noticed that there is potential health risk, I assume. Is that?
Yes. Well, there are two elements to that. The first one is a lot of the conditions, including this warning sign, have been carried over from the previous set of conditions at the previous location of the radio station. And then in addition to that, there is a power density report that was provided by the applicant that also concludes as a mitigation effort for a warning sign to be installed at a designated location just to warn individuals and community members in the public of potential concerns. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Where is that located? Where is the RF sign posted? I must have missed it on the elevation.
It's on the right-hand side, the proposed roof plane. If you look to the south, there's a little blue box.
Oh.
And that is where the sign will be located.
Okay. All right. I didn't see it in the plans, is what I'm saying. Is it on the plans that we reviewed and I didn't see it?
No, the sign itself is not on the plans. It's the location, and essentially it's a Category 3, which is a standard warning sign.
Okay. And how does this antenna compare to the antenna that's on at the current location?
The antenna at the current location, I believe, is it's shorter in height, and it was in accordance to the approval, at least. The approval in 2012 approved a 4 foot high antenna.
Would that be because they're on the second floor? It's a two-story building?
Yes, I believe so.
All right, thank you.
And then also I'd like to add, like tech-wise, it was a few years ago.
Any additional
Maybe
questions?
I've got, any comments, concerns from residents in the area that were addressed?
Staff hasn't received any public correspondence regarding the project.
Regarding the signs again, so in the staff report, it showed the sign, which I guess, again, is of such a size that it'll be administratively approved. The fact that this building now is going to have two separate businesses in them, the La Vida Laguna and the radio station, I'm assuming they'll probably each have their own sign. Is there any issue with having two signs for two businesses on a single building or anything like that?
No, staff doesn't foresee any issues.
Any no other questions? Okay, to the applicant team, you guys will have 5 minutes. You can push that button.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is my architect, Vince. He's here to answer any technical questions. My name is Billy Freed. I'm the applicant. I assumed control of the radio station, the nonprofit community station, KXFM, back in April because it was in danger of failing. It was in deep financial trouble. And having an FCC license in our town of Laguna Beach is really a tremendous asset that shouldn't be taken for granted. If we lost that license, if they closed, we would likely never get a license again. The FCC doesn't grant licenses because the airwaves are full. You can only acquire these in auction, which is what the previous owner did. So part of my strategy to make sure that this station could thrive and be a very, very important element to our safety protocols in the event of an emergency, you may also know that the station can operate when the electric grid goes down because we have a backup generator provided by a financial grant from the city, in which case we can communicate with residents and our emergency officials can communicate if our residents have a battery-operated or hand-crank radio. So that's really the 10 stakes here, is having this as a tool to save lives. I really earnestly believe that. In fact, I asked our current fire chief, Nico King, if they had a radio station in Paradise, California, does he believe lives would have been saved? And he said yes. So part of the strategy to keep this station vibrant was to move it for several reasons. The rent that we're currently paying is untenable. It's unaffordable. It's just something that we cannot manage. You know, as a nonprofit, we rely on member support. We can't sell advertising or things like that. We can't raise money. People can't invest. It's strictly a donation-based endeavor. So we need to lower our expenses. Furthermore, this location gives us better coverage to the city. We reach further into the canyon, further into North Laguna, and that's because we're actually at a higher elevation than the current location. So we're not changing a thing. There's no variance required. There's no design changes to the building. It's directly across the street from the building that you just had a hearing on, and I'm happy to hear that you denied it because I like looking at that brick. In fact, we have some right on our building. The third reason we want to do it at this location is because it's a ground floor studio, which enables us to engage the community more. There's hardscape outside. We want to be able to have people look into the window and see people broadcasting just as a cool kind of community element. So there's no view impacts. As you know, the building across the street is a two-story building. There's no views to the ocean. So I don't think we impact anybody. And as far as that roof, the RF frequencies are concerned, we did commission an electrical engineer study. They deemed it so low-powered and so not impactful that, as you saw, we have a second-story vacation rental right adjacent to it, and they determined that there was no health risk to those tenants there. So it's really, I think, just kind of something they always recommend, putting that warning signing up just for anybody that's on the roof. So this is not 5G, 4G, 3G. This is old school, radio antenna. They've been around for centuries, and I don't believe there's ever been any confirmed health risk with that. So that's pretty much all I have to say. I hope you guys approve it. We've been waiting a long time. Staff's done a great job. I love your suit. Very nice looking. And yeah, if you have any questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions of the applicant team? Seeing none. Any members of the public wish to speak on this item? Seeing none. Is there anything you would like to add?
Tune in and turn on to the all-new KXFM, Lagunas Community Radio.
Wow. Very well done. Okay.
Broadcasting live from the Planning Commission.
I will close the public hearing, and we will go to Commissioner comments. You want to start at this end?
I'm supportive, and thank you for, I learned something tonight. Thank you for that history.
I agree. Keep going, and I'm glad you're here and doing it, and I can be supportive as well.
I'm supportive as well, and we'll see whether or not your extra reach is able to reach us kind of on the backside of top of the world there, where once you go up and over the ridge in the past, you would kind of lose the signal. So we'll see what happens. But
I mentioned that the FCC, we would like to get extenders, but the FCC won't permit it. We have a specific category of low-powered FM. They don't want us going up against signals from major markets, so that's a challenge.
Okay.
I really like the community outreach thought because even though there's some pedestrian activity in that area, it's just sort of trickling off Coast Highway. I think it'll be a real destination, actually. And there's so many cool programs on. I think it's another way to broaden your audience. Not that the audience isn't big, but I think it'll be lively and fun.
I'd love to do a show on what the Planning Commission does.
Okay.
I nominate
that's
Susan
five
White.
of us.
Well,
I nominate Commissioner Whit.
Lots of
White.
opinions.
I was going to ask for more than 30 minutes a week of Dubin, so maybe we can incorporate that.
We're trying.
Yeah.
Commissioner Dubin. Speaking of Dubin.
Yeah. So I just want to add that, I know there was something in the staff report about, that this use isn't specific to this area, but I find it no more obnoxious than other permitted uses like a restaurant that serves alcohol. But the big thing for me is the emergency broadcast capability, because we do live in a community that has been hit hard by, fires and floods and mud, earth moving and all kinds of things. So to have this a functional way of communicating with the community, I think is a really important aspect of this. And I do concur with the CUP findings as well as the Class 1 CEQA exemption. So,
Thank you. Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
I think somebody else should handle this since I.
Okay.
So moved.
I'll run through the whole thing. All right.
Oh.
I move that we adopt a resolution approving conditional use permit 24-1869 and design review 24-1871 and finding that said action is exempt from CEQA.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Goldman?
Yes.
Commissioner Whiten?
Yes.
Commissioner Dubin?
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Kellenberg?
Yes.
Chair Sadler?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion is approved. Congratulations.
When do you actually move over?
Well, we didn't want to jump the gun, but we'd hope to do it by the end of the year. Now we can get to work now that we have the approval. So
Great.
thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay. To staff, is there any other business?
Yes, Chair. Just one quick update. The October 16th Planning Commission meeting will be canceled. And so our next regular meeting will be on November 6, 2024.
Okay, November 6, 11/6/24. Okay. Any committee, commissioners, or staff reports? Commissioner comments on anything? Nope. Okay. Would somebody?
Just quickly, any particular reason for the cancellation?
We had a minimum of one project ready for that hearing. Applicant opted to instead take the November 6th date, and we have several projects ready for that date. So given that there was no business to be conducted on October 16th, staff is opting to cancel that meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion for adjournment to our next scheduled meeting on November 6th?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, roll call.
Commissioner Goldman? Yes. Commissioner Whiten? Yes. Commissioner Dubin?
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Kellenberg?
Yes.
Chair Sadler?
Yes,
Thank
we are
you.
officially adjourned. Thank you.